last night and yesterday, they just wiped out what seems to be the entire Syrian Air Force and Navy.
I regret to inform you of a dire reality. Syria's military is being annihilated right now. Their Navy fleet, gone. Air Force, destroyed. Air defenses, wiped out. Army weapons stores, obliterated. Who did this? The Israeli Air Force and Navy. After Bashar al-Assad's fall, Israel hit hard on 3 fronts. First, they crushed the Syrian naval fleet. Not a torpedo remains.
Israel says it has destroyed Syria's naval fleet.
Not a ship, not a boat. Second, they targeted the Air Force. Remember Mohammed al-Golani's forces posing with Syrian planes at captured bases? Israel's airstrikes turned them into scrap. Every fighter jet is down. Third, Israeli tanks seized more of the Syrian border. Their focus, Mount Hermon. Not aware of its strategic value, let me explain 3 points. First, it dominates the Syrian border territory. Stand at the top, see everything, hit any spot with artillery. Second, it overlooks Lebanon's Litani River, Israel's forces. They control the whole area. Why the Litani River? Israel wants its waters like it took Lake Tiberias. Third, Mount Hermon splits the Syrian and Lebanese borders. Iran used it to arm Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. It's a key supply line. Now, Israel holds it. What's next for the region? Please stick with me to find out. If this hits hard, subscribe for unfiltered conflict insights. Let's dive in. So, did Israeli actions end there? Unfortunately, they did not. As Israeli tanks roll through the streets of southern Syrian territory without encountering resistance, more and more armored units have advanced deep into Syria, reaching a town named Katana. To give you a sense of proximity, Katana is just a short drive from the Syrian capital, Damascus, as reported by Reuters. Now, that's the situation with Israel. What about Turkey? While Israel focuses on the south, Turkey is making moves to gain influence in northern Syria. Currently, the Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, control the regions highlighted in yellow on the map. This strategic maneuvering by Turkey underscores its intent to exert authority over these areas, counterbalancing the Israeli advances in the south. So, what's the issue with Turkey and the SDF? The Syrian Democratic Forces are affiliated with the PKK, a group seeking to establish an independent Kurdish state in southern Turkey. In response, Turkey has allowed Israel to operate in the south while mobilizing Turkish-backed Free Syrian Army forces to launch armed attacks on SDF positions, supported by Turkish drones. Armed attacks were more intense than battles in Aleppo, or even Damascus. Why is this significant? Look at the Manbij area on the map. It's one of northern Syria's most strategically sensitive locations, bridging the Euphrates rivers west and east. The SDF was positioned on both sides of the river to maintain control. However, Turkish-backed forces targeted the SDF in Manbij, relentlessly attacking until the SDF withdrew east of the Euphrates. These assaults were so forceful that despite US military support for the SDF, they were forced to retreat. Now, I anticipate 2 pressing questions. Why does the US support the SDF if it doesn't defend them against Turkish forces? Why is the US backing the SDF in the first place? Let's dive into the answers to these crucial issues. Why does the US support the SDF? Look to northeastern Syria. It's loaded with oil and gas. Not in the know? The US, with the SDF, grabs 82% of Syria's oil yearly. That's per the Syrian Ministry of Oil. They ship it to Iraq and Turkey, sell it off, fund their stay. Reports say the United States made over $20 billion from Syrian oil since entering to fight ISIS. Years in, ISIS still lingers. US grip on oil, tight as ever. Remember al-Golani's vow to kick out foreign forces? That includes the US, but guess what? A new U.S. deal with al-Golani. They stay until ISIS is gone. Since 2014, that's unfinished. We know the truth. Fighting ISIS is just a cover. It justifies their stay. It keeps oil flowing. Al-Golani seems blind to it. Here's the real play. US support for SDF. Pure strategy. A weak SDF needs US help. That keeps troops near rich oil fields. What if SDF beats Turkey? Takes all of northern Syria? Sets up their own region? No more US needed. They'd wave goodbye. United States' oil control, gone. So, the US and Turkey, it's a dirty deal. Turkey pressures SDF, stops their independence. The US holds on to Syria's oil and gas. What's next? Please stick with me. If this angers you, subscribe to Raw Conflict Truths. Let's dive deeper. In this complex geopolitical chess game, Turkey is expanding its hold in northern Syria. Israel is advancing in the south, and the US controls the oil resources. But what about Mohammed al-Golani? Where is he in this game? His whereabouts and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and the Syrian rebels remain unknown. Several critical questions arise from these developments. Why has Israel moved within just 20 minutes of Damascus's borders? Is there a clandestine agreement we're unaware of? And if so, what could the details entail? Extent of destruction. How significantly has Israel impacted the Syrian army's capabilities, both human and material? Could some undiscovered underground bases and arsenals remain untouched? Turkey's position. Didn't President Recep Tayyip Erdogan assert that he wouldn't allow Syria to be divided? Yet, alongside the United States and Israel, he's involved in a territorial division. What are his true motives? Iraq's concerns. Why does Iraq view the situation in Syria with such apprehension, as if it's aware of unannounced developments? Golani's justifications. What justifications does Mohammed al-Golani offer for the territorial gains made by Turkey, the US, and Israel at Syria's expense? These pressing questions demand answers. Let's delve into each one to uncover the underlying complexities. Why? Did Israel approach Damascus? According to official statements, the Israeli military denies any close proximity to Damascus, claiming only the occupation of Mount Hermon and the surrounding areas up to 25 kilometers deep. However, Israel's strategic positioning serves two main purposes. Firstly, it's a means to exert control that intimidates Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Secondly, being near the capital allows Israel to act swiftly, potentially taking control of Damascus if HTS resists its directives. Israel's approach to Mohammed al-Golani and HTS is a classic carrot-and-stick strategy. If they challenge Israel's operations against Syrian forces, the threat looms of a siege on Damascus, potentially resulting in an occupation that could dethrone al-Golani. Conversely, if he cooperates, Israel will offer protection and stability to al-Golani's leadership. What evidence supports this? Israeli Air Force strikes. The Israeli Air Force has targeted Syrian military forces, effectively clearing the path for Mohammed al-Golani's advance towards Damascus. This support suggests cooperation in al-Golani's quest for control over the US agreement with al-Golani. An agreement exists, ensuring the US military's ongoing presence in Syria, reflecting a shift in American perception. The US State Department has even considered delisting al-Golani and lifting sanctions on HTS. This dramatic change implies Israel's tacit approval of al-Golani's evolving status, as American foreign policy likely aligns with Israeli interests. Regarding him, al-Golani's silence. Despite the Israeli military's encroachment into Syrian territory, al-Golani has remained silent. His lack of response to Israeli advances near Damascus suggests acquiescence, possibly under pressure or agreement. Netanyahu's statement. Following Israel's position near Damascus, Netanyahu publicly expressed willingness to recognize al-Golani's governance over Syria and establish diplomatic ties. The condition? No harm should come to Israeli forces. This reinforces the carrot-and-stick strategy. Israel offers al-Golani power in Syria, but any threat to their presence could lead to his removal, as happened with Bashar al-Assad. This complex interplay of geopolitics reveals how Israel leverages its position to influence events on the ground, all within a framework of strategic maneuvering and alliances. Did Golani respond to these developments? While he remained silent, those around him certainly reacted. Before diving into their responses, let's address some critical points. Without the support of Turkey, Israel, and the United States, Mohammed al-Golani would not have been able to form or sustain an armed militia. Without these major powers, knowledge or consent, it's implausible to think he could have moved forces from northern Syria to Aleppo, and eventually to Hama and Damascus. Do you truly believe that Golani created his militia under the watchful eyes of the Turkish, American, and Israeli armies with makeshift weapons and maneuvered them across Syria against these nations' interests? The collaboration between the four parties was evident. Golani would take Damascus, Israel would secure southern Syria, America would claim the oil fields, and Turkey would dominate the north. The proof is in the swift execution. It all transpired within 14 days after Golani launched his campaign. Bashar al-Assad fled, Golani seized power in Damascus, Israel expanded in the south, the US maintained control over oil resources, and Turkey solidified its grip in the north. Isn't this precisely what occurred? You might argue that during Bashar's era, the dynamics were similar. The United States controlled the oil, Turkey held the north, and Israel occupied the Golan Heights in the south. You're not wrong, but consider this. The difference lies in leadership and minor territorial adjustments. Bashar has been replaced by Golani, with Turkey and Israel slightly increasing their areas of influence. In essence, the power structures remain unchanged. Golani has taken Bashar's place, while Turkey and Israel have modestly expanded their zones of control. Isn't that what truly happened? Let us address the question. How much of the Syrian army's capabilities did Israel destroy? Officially, Israel claims 80%, but I assert it's closer to 100%. Why do I say this? Over a day, the Israeli Air Force executed more than 300 sorties targeting the Syrian army's air, sea, and land bases, with no resistance. No one shot was fired in defense, and no protests were made. For instance, the Panzer missile platforms that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, captured after Bashar al-Assad's fall were among the targets hit by Israeli aircraft. Israel's bombardment left nothing untouched, neither above nor below ground. Israel's TV Channel 12 proudly highlighted the Israeli Air Force's freedom to operate in Syrian airspace unchallenged for the first time in 50 years. Under Bashar's regime, strikes were a hit-and-run affair. Now, Israeli jets enter Syrian airspace, search leisurely for targets, and strike when ready, only turning back once fuel is low. This complete lack of resistance reflects the Syrian army's disintegration, as noted by Channel 12. Moving on, you might ask, didn't the Turkish president declare he wouldn't allow Syria to be divided? Yet today, he's actively involved in its partition. How is that possible? The answer is straightforward. The Turkish president is playing a double game. Just look at the news. Turkish-backed forces are continuously expanding their control over northern Syria, hour by hour. What more do you need to comprehend the unfolding reality? What exactly is it about the situation in Syria that has Iraq so concerned? Iraq finds itself in a precarious position, as it is one of the last regional holdouts still hosting Iranian militias. According to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's statements about ending Iran's military footprint in the region, Iraq could very well be the next target. Complicating matters further, Iraq has recently threatened to expel US forces from its territory. Should a scenario similar to Syria's unfold in Iraq, the US would want to maintain a presence near Iraq's oil wells. For those unfamiliar, the US not only controls a significant portion of Iraqi oil wells, but also exercises control over the revenues from all of Iraq's oil production. You might be wondering, how does this work? Let me explain. When Iraq sells oil to a country like China, you would assume Iraq receives the payment. However, the reality is quite different. Following the US invasion of Iraq, a law was imposed preventing Iraq from directly receiving its oil revenues, ostensibly to prevent misuse by the Iraqi government and potential funding of terrorist activities. So, what does the US do? It established the Development Fund for Iraq at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. This functions much like a piggy bank. When countries buy Iraqi oil, payments are made directly into this fund rather than to Iraq. But what happens when Iraq needs money? For salaries, food, and other expenses, they must submit a list of expenses to the US detailing proposed spending, and the US reviews these expenses to ensure they're legitimate before dispersing the necessary funds. Dear viewers, what you are hearing continues to unfold today even. Though the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution in 2010 to dismantle the Development Fund for Iraq, aiming to prevent further American control over Iraqi oil revenues. However, the United States ignored this resolution and continues. Managing the fund. Do you understand what this implies? Iraq, once under Saddam Hussein, now finds itself in a position where its people depend on allowances managed by the US. You might wonder, what happens to any surplus funds? Officially, the funds are held for Iraq. To be clear, this is no exaggeration. This is the current state of play. Following the US assassination of Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad, Iraq began demanding the withdrawal of American troops. You might ask, why is Iraq concerned about Soleimani's assassination? Qasem Soleimani, commander of the Iranian Quds Force, was a significant figure because Iran heavily influences Iraq's government, much like in Syria and Lebanon. His assassination agitated Iran's allies in Iraq. Should the United States exit Iraq, it risks losing control over Iraqi oil fields and revenues. As a result, the US supports the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, plan to expel Iranian militias from Iraq, aligning with Turkey's interests as well. Turkey seeks to impose control over northern Iraq to combat the Kurdish forces rebelling in southern Turkey, much like its actions in the north of Syria. Ultimately, the three nations, Turkey, Israel, and America, are replicating their strategy from Syria and Iraq, aiming to divide and exercise control over these regions. Remember these key players, as their actions will continue to shape geopolitical dynamics in the area. Let's tackle the final question. Mohammed al-Golani's response to the current situation. Al-Golani has stated that he's occupied with tracking down remnants of Bashar al-Assad's regime, particularly officers accused of torture. While it's commendable to hold them accountable, what about the Israeli incursion? The Turkish incursion? The control of oil wells by the US. Mohammed al-Golani has remained silent on these issues, but he or his close associates have not commented. Interestingly, some Islamic scholars have weighed in, claiming that al-Golani believes in the jurisprudence of priorities. He's focused on consolidating control over Syria's state apparatus. For instance, he has appointed a new prime minister, Mohammed al-Bashir. Born in 1983 in Jabal al-Zawiya, Idlib province, al-Bashir graduated in electrical engineering in 2007 from Idlib University. Despite his technical background, he directed Sharia education for 2 years and later served as Minister of Development and Humanitarian Affairs in the HTS-affiliated Salvation Government based in Idlib. With HTS taking control of Damascus, al-Bashir now heads the Salvation Government and will continue until the elections by the end of the year, followed by constitutional amendments. The plan is to elect a new president and form a new government. Afterward, as we've discussed, Syria remains divided, with each faction claiming what they can. Once stolen by Bashar al-Assad, Russia, and Iran, Syria is now under the influence of Golani, Turkey, and Israel. Same theft, new players, larger areas. The people of Syria must quickly realize that while they celebrate Assad's downfall, their nation is being systematically dismantled. The warning is clear. It may be too late if Syrians wait for elections and governmental reforms. In just 24 hours, Golani allowed the Israeli Air Force to dismantle the Syrian army, signed an agreement for the US to safeguard oil fields, and ceded control of the north to Turkey. What will happen in a month or two? The question stands. Can the Syrian people prevent the partition and theft of their country, or is it already too late? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you found this episode insightful, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon to stay updated on our next deep dive. Until then, stay informed, stay sharp. This is Geopolitics Deep Dive.